Hello, church. God has a much better plan for me than I do, if I'm willing to wait on it. The only thing worse than waiting on God is wishing that you had. The book of James gives us some great information about patience. It's found in James chapter 5. Be patient until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and late rains. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble against one another, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. As an example of suffering and patience, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Behold, we consider those blessed who remain steadfast. You have heard of the steadfastness of Job, and you've seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. One of the most frustrating things that could ever happen to an oyster is to have lodged in its shell a tiny grain of sand. When that happens, 99.9% of the time, the oyster is able to locate the grain of sand and get rid of it, and then go about doing whatever it is that oysters do. But there are those occasions, try as it may, the oyster cannot remove the grain of sand, but it finds itself in a situation that it cannot change, in a circumstance it can't get rid of. The oyster is irritated, frustrated, exasperated, losing its mind because it cannot change the situation. And it's that moment when the oyster goes to plan B. If I can't get rid of it, I might as well make the most of it. So it finds that grain of sand and it begins to coat it over with a liquid that when the liquid solidifies, turns it into something that you and I pay a lot of money for, a pearl. All a pearl is the fruit of a frustrated oyster. If there were no grains of sand, no irritation, frustration, exasperation, there would be no pearl. And if you've been made in the image of God, God says, I want to make you into a pearl. Ephesians tells us that we are God's poem. We are God's workmanship. We are God's masterpiece. God don't make a mistake. God don't make a mess. And God don't make junk. We've been created on purpose, for a purpose, and He wants to lift us up as a pearl of great price. We love the destination, but we don't like the process. But you don't become a pearl without enduring life's grains of sand. We don't get to God's delivery room of blessing without first taking a stop in His waiting room called patience. If you look in God's kitchen, there are no microwaves, only crock pots. Anyone God has used has spent time in God's crock pot. Joseph, he was a young teenage punk and he was bragging to his brothers how they were going to bow down to him. But at the end of his life, he was a humble man. What changed him was dealing with life's grains of sand. 13 years being lied about, forgotten, betrayed, slow cooking. And when he comes out, he's patient. Moses spends 40 years in the desert tending sheep, living a daily, monotonous existence. Then God shows up and says, you haven't been wasting your time tending sheep. Now you're going to tend my sheep. Patience. David, great king, ushers in the golden era of Israel. Yet he spent 15 years after he was anointed as king running from the deranged King Saul, wondering, God, where are you? Patience. God is saying, I know you want to hurry up and get there, but I don't operate on your timetable. There are some things you can't control. There are some people you can't control. So quit trying to fix them. And James begins with a command. He says, be patient. Which the word patient comes from two words. Macrothumos. Macro means long. Thumos is where we get the word thermometer. A thermometer measures heat. Thumos means anger. Be patient. pictures someone who is in a situation where their anger is being tested and God is calling on them to be long toward anger. The reason we don't pray for patience is because we know when we pray for patience, we're saying, God, put me in something I don't like. You learn to be patient by having a child who runs from the very God that you've lived for, and they reject your God, and you can't get into their heart. You learn patience by serving with people, normal people, dysfunctional people. You learn patience by waiting on the result of that medical test. Patience. I'm in something I don't like, something I can't fix. Nobody can fix it. I need to learn to wait on God. If you've ever flown in a plane, you may have experienced what's called a holding pattern. There's a group of people that watch what's on the ground and they watch what's in the air. They can see what the plane passengers can't see, and if they don't put that plane in a holding pattern, if it tries to land, it will crash and everybody will die. Some of us are in a holding pattern, and we need to know that God sits up high and He looks down low and He sees what you can't see, and He doesn't land on our timetable. Are you making the most of the holding pattern? In our next lesson, we're going to define what patience looks like. Be patient until then, and we'll see you next time.